Did you guys hear that? That's the sound of the elites throwing old Jess Staley under the bus. JP Morgan Chase is suing one of its former bankers, James Jess Staley, over his connections to Jeffrey Epstein. This is insane because Jess Staley was a superstar back at JP Morgan Chase. He was even one of Jamie Dimon's top lieutenants, and Jamie Dimon is the fucking CEO of JP Morgan Chase. In the lawsuit, JP Morgan states that Staley affirmatively represented the true facts of his and Epstein's personal interactions and activities and repeatedly provided misleading information about Mr. Epstein to bank officials. Jess Staley's ties to Epstein go back decades, and now the chickens are coming home to roost. A New York federal judge has ruled that the U.S. Virgin Islands and women who accuse the late investor Jeffrey Epstein of sexual abuse can proceed with lawsuits claiming that JP Morgan Chase knowingly benefited from participating in Epstein's sex trafficking scheme. This comes from CNBC. The judge also allowed parts of a separate similar lawsuit by Epstein's accusers against Deutsche Bank, this one right here, to proceed. Yeah, how did these institutions not know of what Epstein was up to? But I think it's very clear that banks are amoral institutions that don't really give a fuck about ethics and will take money from wherever they can get it. Sex traffickers be damned. Oh yeah, down with the banks. New court documents claim that JP Morgan execs were so familiar with Jeffrey Epstein's abuse that they laughed about him being out with 16-year-old Miley Cyrus. The lawsuit states that senior managers at the bank joked about Epstein's interest in young girls, including Cyrus in 2008 when she was still starring in Hannah Montana. Disgusting. The lawsuit in question was filed by the government of the U.S. Virgin Islands. The lawsuit also claims that at least 20 victims were paid through Epstein's accounts with JP Morgan in the excess of $1 million. Apparently, according to documents, Epstein bought a woman when she was 14 and then he paid her $600,000. Looking at all this information, one could say that JP Morgan Chase finances pedophilia. Now, to avoid JP Morgan's lawyers, I'm not saying that, but one could. A federal judge has ordered JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon to set aside 2 days for questioning in regards to JP Morgan's former client, Jeffrey Epstein. This has to do with the lawsuit that the U.S. Virgin Islands is laying on JP Morgan Chase over their ties to Jeffrey Epstein. In all, a U.S. district judge is allowing for Dimon to be deposed for up to 7 hours. Trial is scheduled for October 23rd. I'd like to point out that Jamie Dimon joined JP Morgan Chase in 2004 and he became its CEO in 2005. Epstein was a JP Morgan client from 2000 to 2013. Even after Epstein pleaded guilty to lewd charges back in 2008, they kept him on another 5 years. So this is a big old bombshell. Apparently, people have gotten their hands on Jeffrey Epstein's private calendar, and it reveals a whole bunch of names. Probably the biggest name that was revealed on this list is current CIA Director William Burns. William Burns met with Epstein 3 times in 2014. They first met in Washington, and then he met Epstein in his townhouse in Manhattan. Catherine Roemmler, a White House counsel for Obama and a top lawyer at Goldman Sachs, met with Epstein dozens of times. Leon Botstein, the president of Bard College, invited Epstein to campus, and when Epstein went, he brought a small group of girls. This one really stings. Noam Chomsky was scheduled to have dinner with Epstein in 2015. Noam, why? Man, things are not looking good for old Jess Staley. Newly released court documents allege former JP Morgan executive Jess Staley was personally involved in a series of crimes tied to deceased pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. A U.S. judge alleged that Staley was personally involved in the abuse of some of Epstein's victims living on Little St. James. The judge also claims that Jess Staley received sexually suggestive photographs of young women from Jeffrey Epstein. Now, this is a direct quote lifted from the U.S. Virgin Islands lawsuit against Jess Staley. Staley was key to making all of Epstein's depraved dreams of sexual abuse and sex trafficking of countless young women possible. Epstein would bring Staley high ultra-wealth clients. Staley would make Epstein untouchable. Hey, listen, I got a question for you. Have you guys seen Google co-founder Larry Page? Because the U.S. Virgin Islands are looking for him. You see, the U.S. Virgin Islands is looking to subpoena old Larry Page because he may have been referred to JP Morgan Chase by none other than Jeffrey Epstein. This is all a part of the U.S. Virgin Islands lawsuit against JP Morgan over their ties to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, the reason why they're having a hard time trying to subpoena Larry Page is because they can't seem to find him. It seems old billionaire boy over here doesn't have a reliable address and the government's having a hard time trying to serve him his fucking papers. I hope they find him though. We have a lot of questions to ask him. According to a philanthropist named Barnaby Marsh, that's a hilarious name, by the way. Funny name owner and philanthropist Barnaby Marsh has claimed that Jeffrey Epstein said he played a role in managing Bill Gates' money. This contradicts Gates' previous claim where he stated he only met with Epstein for philanthropic reasons. Marsh relayed all of this information to the Wall Street Journal after it was found out that he also had many meetings with Epstein. Marsh said that many billionaires met with Epstein. They knew of him and nobody ever said, watch out. Bill Gates today is worth $113.2 billion. Tell me, what financial advice did this man need from a convicted pedophile? This right here is Little St. James, Jeffrey Epstein's private island. Well, one of his private islands. He actually owned two. This one, Little St. James, and Great St. James, which is ironically smaller than Little St. James. None of that matters. What matters is this was known as Pedophile Island, and Pedophile Island 1 and 2 have been bought by an investor for $60 million. This is Stephen Deckoff. He's the investor that has purchased Little St. James and Great St. James for $60 million. Stephen Deckoff wants to take Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile islands and turn them into a luxury resort. Good luck with that, dog. What are you gonna do, Stephen? Are you gonna have hot stone massages in the Blue Temple? You know what? Massages are probably a bad idea. Breaking news straight from the Wall Street Journal. According to emails, Jeffrey Epstein reportedly threatened Bill Gates with knowledge that Gates had an affair with a Russian bridge player back in the 2010s. Did somebody say McDonald's? I mean, blackmail? Epstein met the Russian bridge player in 2013 and he paid for her to attend a coding camp. In 2017, Epstein sent Gates an email asking Gates to pay Epstein for sending the woman to camp and implying that if he wouldn't, he would expose the affair. You see, Epstein was quite cross with Gates because Epstein was trying to get old Billy to join a large charitable fund that Epstein was setting up with JP Morgan Chase. Bill wouldn't join, and that's when Epstein resorted to the blackmail. Also, Gates has confirmed the story. Alright, so we all know that it's been proven that Jeffrey Epstein tried to blackmail Bill Gates over an extramarital affair involving a Russian bridge player named Mila Antonova. The dude who was a part of Gates' crew that pointed Antonova towards Epstein was Boris Nikolic, this guy right here. Nikolic was Gates' chief science and technology officer, basically his right-hand man. This is an important detail that I missed and that people aren't bringing up, but back in 2019, 2 days before Epstein unalived himself, he named Boris Nikolic a backup executor in his will. Boris says that he didn't talk to Epstein about this at all beforehand, and he actually denied the request to be an executor. And this is why I use music from The Shining, folks, because this is a ghost story. We got messages from beyond the grave. You saw the headline, folks. JP Morgan settles with Jeffrey Epstein victims for $290 million. This resolves a large part of litigation over the bank's relationship with the pedo prince. According to an article on Reuters, Monday's accord would resolve claims against the largest U.S. bank by potentially more than 100 victims, led by a former ballet dancer known as Jane Doe 1. It makes sense that JP Morgan Chase would want this to go away as fast as possible. Being associated with human trafficking is not the best thing for business. Now, Epstein's victims don't owe us anything and they can settle with whoever they want, but when these court cases are settled like this, that usually puts a cap on things. This keeps information from getting out there in the form of depositions and discovery. Kind of a drag, honestly.